Welcome to House of the Dragon lore. So there hasn't been much news or pictures from the House of the Dragon world as of today. There's been a few pictures, but nothing significant or nothing that I think is worth really talking about. They probably began filming the scenes in studio now, like some dragon scenes and stuff like that, which will cause a blockage of spy photos. Hoping to see more soon, especially of Daemon and Rhaenyra. So I've started watching Game of Thrones again. This is probably my 5th time watching the whole series. So I start from the beginning, of course, and go to the end. And there's always things that I pick up on that I didn't pick up on, the last 5 times I watched it. So it's never a waste of time to rewatch Game of Thrones. And it also cheers me up. I've been feeling kind of down lately, and Game of Thrones and dragons have always been something that just get my mind off things and I go into another headspace. And it makes me happy and I really enjoy it. And I'm getting excited about House of the Dragon. So I just want to see the dragons again from Game of Thrones. And I love Daenerys Targaryen and all her scenes. This episode is probably going to be one of the hardest for me to talk about because this dragon went through hell and back and suffered a great deal. It is also very ironic because Sunfyre the Golden may have been the most beautiful dragon ever to fly the skies above Westeros, or even their planet as a whole, and the Dance of Dragons stole all that pride and beauty from him. If you don't like to hear about dragons suffering and violence and blood and gore, then you probably shouldn't listen to this episode. But it's also going to be very interesting. It's a very interesting part of the Fire and Blood book. And also, of course, I think a lot of these scenes will be incorporated into House of the Dragon. So Sunfyre, also known as Sunfyre the Golden, was a splendid young male dragon. He was ridden by King Aegon II. And King Aegon II was one of the Greens. He was Alicent's son. And, of course, he fought the Blacks, as you know from some of my previous episodes. So he's not on one of my favorite sides, but I really love his dragon, Sunfyre, and he's still a very interesting character. According to Archmaester Glendane, Sunfyre was the most beautiful dragon ever seen upon the earth. Sunfyre had gleaming gold scales, which shone like beaten gold in the sunlight, and pale pink wing membranes. His flames were golden as well. Huge and heavy, Sunfyre was a formidable fighter despite his youth. Sunfyre's egg hatched on Dragonstone. Although Sunfyre's exact year of birth has never been stated, he was described as being a young dragon in 120 AC and 129 AC. Sunfyre is known to have been older than Targaryen, although it is unknown when exactly Prince Aegon Targaryen claimed Sunfyre as his mount. Aegon the Elder was the 6th Targaryen king to sit the Iron Throne, succeeding his father. Aegon and Rhaenyra fought for the throne in the Civil War, the singers called the Dance of the Dragons, in which both siblings perished. Aegon was married to his younger sister Helena, and had 3 children by her. During the Dance of the Dragons, Aegon took a 3-headed golden dragon for his personal sigil instead of the red 3-headed Targaryen dragon, indicating his mount. Aegon's supporters used this sigil as their battle flag. King Aegon II rode Sunfyre during the Dance of the Dragons. Upon Sunfyre's back, King Aegon II participated in the Battle of Rook's Rest, one of the first major battles of the war in 129 AC. At Rook's Rest, Aegon II, his hand of the king Sir Christian Cole, and his brother Prince Aemon lured Princess Rhaenys Targaryen into a trap. And Rhaenys Targaryen was the wife of Corlys Velaryon, and she's an amazing character, and she's one of my favorites. Sunfyre and Aemon's dragon Vhagar faced Rhaenys dragon Meleys in battle, and although the older, cunning and battle-experienced Meleys might have stood a chance against Vhagar alone, the combined forces of Vhagar and Sunfyre were too much. The three dragons battled 1,000 feet above the fields. At one point, Meleys managed to close her jaws around Sunfyre's neck, but Vhagar fell upon them from above, causing the three dragons to fall to the earth. Although Vhagar and Sunfyre emerged victorious from the fight, Sunfyre was severely wounded in the battle, as one wing had been half torn from his body during the fight. Unable to fly and too huge and heavy to be moved, Sunfyre remained near Rook's rest to allow him time to heal. Sir Christian Cole stationed men near the dragon to guard him. At first the dragon fed on the burned carcasses of the slain soldiers, but after those were gone, Cole's men brought the dragon calves and sheep to eat. When Lord Waelys Mouton reconquered Rook's Rest from Aegon II's forces, he led his bravest men to Sunfyre, hoping to slay the dragon. Enraged by the attacks upon him, Sunfyre fought back with his tail and flames. 70 of the attackers died before the others fled. Amongst the slain was Lord Waelys Mouton. Within a fortnight of the attack, Sunfyre had disappeared. Although his wing had healed in an awkward angle, Sunfyre had recovered enough from his battle with Meleys to fly once again. For half a year, Sunfyre recovered in a remote village. According to the crabs and bruins, Sunfyre may have hidden in the dark piney woods and caves of Crackclaw Point before eventually making his way to Dragonstone. In his text, The Princess and the Queen, Archmaester Gladane speculates on Sunfyre's reason for doing so, suggesting the option of primal instinct to return to his birthplace or urge to rejoin his rider, Aegon II, who had been hiding on the island. According to Gladane, some even suggest that Sunfyre was able to feel Aegon II's urgent need of him. And here is an excerpt from George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood. We may ask what drew him back to the Dragonmont, for many have. Was the wounded dragon with his half-healed broken wing driven by some primal instinct to return to his birthplace? The smoking mountain where he had emerged from his egg? Or did he somehow sense the presence of King Aegon on the island, across long leagues and stormy seas, and fly there to rejoin his rider? Septon Eustace goes so far as to suggest that Sunfyre sensed Aegon's desperate need. Moving on from that quote from Fire and Blood, upon his return, Sunfyre killed the wild dragon Grey Ghost. And I'm not sure why he did this. I'm assuming he was hungry. Or he was just savage and in pain and miserable. I'm not sure. I couldn't find anywhere the reason why he killed Grey Ghost, but he did. And he was reunited with his rider, hid with Aegon II in a lair on the desolate eastern slopes of the Dragonmont. There more than half a year since the dragon's disappearance. They were discovered by Tom Tanglebeard and his son Tom Tangletongue, and bastard nephew Sir Marston Waters, who had concluded from the tales of drunken Volantene sailors that the golden dragon was on the island. Aegon flew upon Sunfyre every day since, regaining strength, while the two Toms and Sir Marston returned to the castle to seek supporters for Aegon and Rhaenyra's stronghold to capture the castle. Dragonstone fell easily to Aegon II's supporters, and Aegon victoriously flew Sunfyre to the castle, where Lady Baela Targaryen and her dragon Moondancer rose to meet him in battle as they were fleeing the castle. Although younger and smaller, Moondancer was also quicker than Sunfyre, who was still troubled by his wounds, and for a time was able to evade his flames, but was blinded when a blast of Sunfyre's golden flames hit her directly in the eyes. Despite the fire, Moondancer advanced on Sunfyre, slamming into him and falling to the ground with him. Although both dragons survived the fall, upon the ground, Moondancer's speed could not defeat Sunfyre's size and weight. The battle with Moondancer had left Sunfyre even more injured than he had been before. He was covered in fresh scars along his back. He would forever be unable to fly and remained in the yard where he had fallen from the sky, at first feeding on the carcass of Moondancer, later on slaughtered sheep. Sunfyre also dined upon Grand Maester Gerardes, who was later disemboweled and dangled before the wounded dragon, though Aegon, who commanded the killing, ordered that Gerardes' upper torso be hung from the castle battlements next to the gates to welcome Rhaenyra on her return. Rhaenyra was eventually fed to Sunfyre, as I mentioned in my episode about Syrac. He ate her in 6 bites, and I'm just going to read an excerpt from Fire and Blood upon the condition of the poor dragon when she seen him. It was plain to see he was a broken thing. He who had been the most magnificent dragon ever to fly the skies of Westeros. The wing all but torn from his body by melees jutted at an awkward angle, whilst fresh scars along his back still smoked and bled when he moved. Sunfyre was coiled in a ball when the queen and her party first beheld him, as he stirred and raised his head, where another dragon had torn chunks from his flesh. On his belly were places where scabs had replaced scales, and where his right eye should have been was only an empty hole, crusted with black blood. Oh my God. See what I was talking about? Disturbing? People don't always consider the dark side and the suffering that is involved in war, and I just feel so bad for Sunfyre. I just think it's not fair that he had to go from being such a beautiful dragon to a beaten thing just laying there waiting to die, basically. It is said that Sunfyre only reacted to Rhaenyra after she had been pricked by a dagger, with the smell of her blood rousing the dragon. Sunfyre bathed her in a blast of his flames before closing his jaws around her. Further, it is said that Sunfyre devoured Rhaenyra in 6 bites, leaving only her left leg below the shin. And her son had to watch all this, which made him later hate dragons. I mean, he had PTSD, obviously. But he didn't want a dragon in his sight because he witnessed his mother being eaten by Sunfyre. Although King Aegon II initially hoped that Sunfyre might recover enough to fly once again, the dragon weakened and eventually refused to eat. He died from his wounds about 6 weeks after Rhaenyra's death, on the 9th day of the 12th moon of 130 AC. Aegon was severely injured during the Dance of the Dragons, which left him bent and twisted. At Rook's Rest, Aegon broke his ribs, his hip, and was burned on half of his body, most severely on his left arm. His burns turned to scars, and his subsequent use of milk of the poppy gave him a puffy face. Later at Dragonstone, Aegon broke both his legs and was, for the remainder of his life, unable to walk. Aegon II was quick to anger and slow to forgive. At the age of 15, he was known to be lazy and somewhat sulky boy, inclined to gluttony at the table and given to swilling ale and strong wine, traits he carried to adulthood. A sweet arbor red was Aegon's favorite vintage. During the dance, after a series of defeats and setbacks, Aegon's drinking grew more frequent as he used strong wine to drown his fears. He would later use wine to dull his pain from the injuries and burns he had suffered. Grand Maester Keith described him as grasping. Through his reign, Aegon never knew joy nor peace. Aegon's mother, Queen Alicent, did not agree with her husband's decision to name Rhaenyra heir to the Iron Throne over Aegon. When her father, Sir Otto Hightower, continually encouraged Viserys to name Aegon his heir, he was stripped of his office as Hand of the King. When attempts to persuade the king to do otherwise failed, Alicent attempted to convince her husband to have Rhaenyra and Aegon marry. Viserys did not agree, as the two siblings were 10 years apart in age, and had never gotten along. King Viserys knew that Alicent only proposed the match to get Aegon on the throne, and thus married Rhaenyra to Sir Laenor Velaryon, heir to Driftmark, instead. It's crazy and it's sad that gravely wounded from the encounter with the dragon Meleys, Sunfyre was still able to kill 3 human attackers and the wild dragon Grey Ghost. Later, still wounded, Sunfyre also killed the dragon Moondancer. Later still, Aegon II had Sunfyre kill Rhaenyra Targaryen. So, I would categorize Sunfyre as one of the most powerful dragons and strongest as well, because he just kept on killing and he was in pain, I'm sure, constantly, and still went to battle. And that just goes to show how tight the bond is between the Targaryens and their dragons. Their dragons will do whatever they need to do for their master and their dragon rider. And he survived many fights and killed many foes. I think if he had lived longer, he may have become much stronger still, but it was not meant to be. He was later wounded so badly he could no longer fly, poor thing. And Sunfyre refused to eat, and of course he eventually died. Some think that he might have been killed, and of course that's very possible. He could have been poisoned or whatnot. But we'll probably never know the answer to that question, as George always leaves an open door with some of his stories and leaves it up to our interpretation to figure out what the true intent actually was or what really happened. Oh my, it's so sad because, Sunfyre was a broken beast. He was destroyed by the chaos of war, and once again a dragon mirroring his rider. And of course, both Sunfyre and Aegon II were gravely wounded. And they were in the same kind of condition, and they were both very angry. In conclusion, I just want to mention that I think Sunfyre's ordeal was the worst of all the dragons. So this is probably the worst one you're going to hear. Although a lot of them are bad and gruesome, and there's some real sad tales to hear in some of my episodes when I get further into the dragons. There's a lot of dragons to talk about, but this one was really hard for me. So if I seem like I'm not happy and giddy, it's because it's hard for me to talk about something so dark. I think also that Sunfyre and Aegon II story is one of the most interesting. And of course, it'll be very exciting, and it will be also heart-wrenching to see this unfold in the House of the Dragons. And I look forward to seeing that. And I also look forward to talking to you guys again in my next episode. So I hope you have a very good day, and I will talk with you again soon. Thank you for listening.